everyone. Good morning. Thank y'all for coming. I have handouts. I'll walk around. I think everybody has one right now. This is Miss Diana from the Alzheimer's Association. I thank her for coming out to give us a presentation. Another one of our wellness presentations we're trying to do here at the ARC. So I'll let Miss Diana take over.
Thank you. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Sometimes I think my voice carries, but I'm sure the microphone helps a little bit more. As Lucy said, my name is Diane Teran. I'm a licensed master social worker. As my role with the association, I am the program manager. Basically what that means is we are the outward kind of facing community engagement. So we are a nonprofit. We are a national organization. Our home office is in Chicago, but we have a chapter office that covers every county in the nation. Our chapter office is here in San Antonio, but we actually cover 43 counties. We go all the way down to the valley and then as west as Del Rio. And then there's 6 chapters total in the state of Texas. So basically, again, as a nonprofit, our goal is, for one, obviously we raise dollars for research to end this disease. In the meantime, though, we know that individuals are dealing with it, persons living with dementia, their family members, and just general education, right? What is this disease? What we'll talk about today, what is normal as we age, and what is not normal, right? This disease is not normal. It's, not everybody gets it as they get older, but there's just some things that we want to look out for, right? And again, so I look at, there's a script here. You all have it to follow. I obviously won't read word for word, but I'm going to share. I know there may be some questions if you want to jot it down, but by all means, please stop me at any time. Sometimes I know we have the question and we want to ask it, and I wait for people. A lot of times it gets answered throughout the presentation, but if you really feel like I'm not gonna remember to ask it at the end, or I don't want to miss it at the end, you can stop me at any time. Okay. Again, if there's something we need clarified or talk a little bit more about it. But again, this presentation, the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, is again just that, what do we need to look out for, kind of these basic things. But we'll be talking about, there'll be a fictitious family that is in here, but the things that are happening to them are very real, and stories that, again, we've heard time and time again and are very common, unfortunately, with this disease. Okay, so I'm going to move forward on this presentation. And there are objectives. So obviously, right, I would love for you to walk out of here and have some takeaways. So really, right, the objectives today are really describing age-related memory, thinking, or behavior changes. Again, right, the idea that as we age, there are absolutely things that happen to us naturally. And then, right, what is the common warning signs that we look for in Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to discuss some tips about approaching someone about memory concerns. This is not an easy thing to talk about, right? From maybe in ourselves or our loved one. We're just not going to walk up to somebody and say, I think you have Alzheimer's, right? Not the nicest thing to do, right? So we have to plan for it, right? Really kind of have a plan of how we're going to talk about it, safe environment, make them feel comfortable, those kinds of things. So we'll talk about those tips. And then really a lot of it too is early detection. There's some things through the association, our research, some really positive things happening in the next couple of years, the last couple of years. But the earlier we can detect it, the better in terms of managing it. We don't have a cure yet, obviously, but there are some things that we talk about in general, just healthy living and things we can do for preventative. And then we talk a little bit about some of the tests. This is a diagnosable disease, so really diagnostic process, what happens, and then definitely, we leave you with our resources through the association, what you can do and how you can reach out if you are really, really concerned, again, about yourself or someone else. Okay. So again, I mentioned that this presentation, we have a fictitious family that will meet. So these are the Garcias. And so Mary, right, so we're really focusing on Mary. So Mary's 73 years old. She's a widow, right? She lives alone. She's a retired teacher who's always been meticulous, right, about her home, how she keeps it. But one of her daughters, Lydia, has recently been noticing that laundry's been piling up, junk mail, old newspapers are lying around the house, right? Things that are not common for her. And so this is Lydia, right? So she's the eldest of the 2 daughters. She lives only a few miles away and sees her mother frequently, right? So obviously she's the one that's noticing those changes. But she does have another daughter, and that's Patricia. And though Patricia lives in another state, right, which is again common, right? Our children move away. She works long hours. She's not able to visit her mother as often as she likes, but she does communicate with her mom and her sister through text, messaging, right, phone, right, all those common things. Okay, so we're going to look in on a text that's happening between them. Okay, so the older sister, right, she's letting her sister know, look, you know, Mom, I'm worried about Mom. She keeps losing things, right? The house is a mess. But a common thing we hear from the one sister, it's normal to get forgetful as we age, right? It's a normal thing. But, you know, the other daughter's noticing this is not like her, right? This is not the norm for Mom, right? So they're going to reach out to Dr. Soloway. Again, this is a fictitious family, but Dr. Soloway is a real person through the association, so we're going to hear from him.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
And I know the audio is a little bit low, but again, Dr. Soloway is saying, right, there are things that are happening. We'll talk about those signs, but you know, that are happening more frequently. It's not forgetting here and there. It's things that are affecting your daily routine that you're noticing, right? That's often. Okay. And then today we're talking about those signs, but there's a couple of videos, and I say, you know, I can talk, but I love, these are our experts in our association. There's also real individuals that are living with this or that are caring for someone, so we like to make sure you hear from those actual individuals. And so this part is, you probably heard me kind of use interchangeable terms, right? I think that confuses people as well. We use the term dementia and Alzheimer's, right? It was like, well, what is that? Are they the same? So we'll watch a video and then we'll talk a little bit more about, they're gonna hopefully clarify that for you, be a little bit more specific about what is dementia and what is Alzheimer's disease.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So again, I love that slide. I wish you had it. I don't think it's specifically on yours, but I do have some brochures that you can take too. I'm a very visual person. I love that. So again, hopefully understandable a little bit more. So dementia is that umbrella term, as she mentioned. It's basically, right, those signs and symptoms that there is something going on with memory, thinking, mood. We equate it to like cancer, right? Cancer is that big umbrella, but how many different types of cancer can there be, right? Similar dementia. Dementia is that umbrella. It's not necessarily one disease in itself. It is multiple things can cause dementia. We use Alzheimer's, and we'll play that video. Alzheimer's just is the most prevalent form, but there are over probably 100 causes. The ones that you saw on that slide were kind of the top 5, from between vascular, Alzheimer's, dementia with Lewy body, frontal lobe, that happens in the frontal lobe. So again, it's just those signs and symptoms. There's changes in memory, thinking, cognition, and then kind of what's causing that in the brain, where it's happening in the brain. And so this is what Alzheimer's is.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So again, right, so Alzheimer's, we know it's a hard name to pronounce. We didn't just make it up, right? It was named after the doctor who first found those plaques and tangles. So, we have to kind of go back to basic biology, if I can remember, right? So our brain, we have all those branches, right? We call them neurons, all those little, branches that talk to each other, right? That, your brain is, right, like the engine of a car. That tells your body what to do, right? Your vision, from telling your lungs to inflate and deflate, your heart to beat, right? That's your brain. So it's all those little all those little branches that are talking to each other. When those plaques and tangles start to form, it starts to break those connections. So really, the brain of someone with Alzheimer's is shrinking, right? So absolutely understanding why there are so many issues going on, from memory, right, to vision, to hearing. We'll talk about more of those, but really, again, it is damaging the brain. Alzheimer's tends to start in the middle of the brain. It will eventually spread. Frontal temporal, Lewy body, it happens in this frontal part of the brain. We had someone that I actually started with Lewy body, and interesting enough, his wife didn't notice. It wasn't, his memory was fine. I think we think of dementia and Alzheimer's as someone, right, forgetful. That's the first thing we think of, right? Memory, forgetfulness. If it's happening in the frontal lobe, that really wasn't his first sign. He was having very bad mood changes, and he was actually hallucinating and having delusions, because that's the part of the brain it was affecting initially. So, right, thinking about those things of how we look at it, and some of the new things that we may not think about when we're talking about what are the signs. So we're going to actually go through, right, so the Alzheimer's Association kind of leading is really set up about, and again, these are 10 signs that we just want people to look out for. I will say too that it doesn't mean that you have to have all 10 of them. We tell individuals, if you think you have one of those signs that you're concerned about, right, the ultimate is that we go see a doctor or we talk to somebody about it. Okay, so we're going to go sign by sign though. So the first one that we're looking at is memory loss that disrupts daily life. Again, that's probably, right, the more common one that we think about when we think about Alzheimer's or dementia, right, where we're forgetting. And we talk about more recently learned information, right? That's why you may hear, if you know of individuals, right, where they can tell you what they did when they were 17, prom, and what they wore and the music that they listened to, but they can't tell you that they ate breakfast this morning, right? They didn't remember, right? That's new information. Things that they've done for 40, 50, 60 years, that probably is going to stay with them longer than something more recent. But again, right, it's happening frequently. They're forgetting important dates, their grandchildren's birth dates, right, their loved ones' birthdays, asking the same question, right, that repetitive nature, asking the same question over and over. Increasingly relying on memory aids. I will have to say, I give a little disclaimer on this. I use Post-its everywhere, right? That's me. I have 20 million things I have to do. So I don't necessarily think that it's a problem. Now, if I had my calendar and my Post-its and I still didn't know where to go for that information, that may be a problem, right? If I had a big calendar and had all my things and I go, God, I don't know what I'm doing today. I don't know. And I don't realize I need to look at my calendar. That's a difference, right? Than using, I think, memory aids, calendars, that is helpful for me, just because you have a lot of things going on, doctor's appointments, right? Social things, right? It's important. So I kind of, again, this is one where it can kind of be a little either way in terms of, yes, memory aids are great, but that you're still remembering how to use them and that you are using them as opposed to having them and not relying on them, right? What would be a typical age-related change, right? Sometimes we forget those appointments, right? I mean, again, we have a lot of things going on, but you may, again, look at your memory aid and you recall, oh yes, I have an appointment today, right? Or sometimes when people, holidays throw me off, right? Especially as I'm working, or even, if you're retired, those holidays throw me off, right? So if I don't work on a Monday, the rest of the week, I'm like, what day is it, right? So but those are things that it can happen, right? As far as kind of forgetting some of those things, but still the ability to recall, right? We've got to be able to still recall those things eventually, right? That normal part. The second sign that we're going to look at is challenges in planning or problem solving. So again, someone that may have the possible signs of dementia, that's really where they're, kind of numbers, familiar things, right? They've made a recipe for 40 years. They know that recipe by heart, but then all of a sudden we're missing steps, right? We forget what's going into that recipe. Keeping track of monthly bills. I use checks. I still write, so I have a little ledger, right? I keep that. If I forget, or to keep track of that again, right? That could be a problem. Things again that you're doing repetitively that you've done for a very long time, if those tend to start to fall off, you're having problems with those things, that may be an indicator, right, a little bit. Difficulty concentrating and taking much longer to complete tasks, right, finding that, and I think you'll hear from John who kind of talks a little bit about that, but it's like, you have a routine in the morning, but now you're realizing what took me 20 minutes is taking me 40 minutes. And not because physical, right, there are some physical things that challenge us, but again, it's the idea that you're forgetting those steps. What's the next thing I've got to do? We do an exercise sometimes where I tell people, right, our bodies do things automatically. You think, I get up in the morning, hopefully, and at night to brush my teeth, right? Sometimes we say, write down, if you wrote down actually every step, think about every step it takes you to brush your teeth, right? I've got to get to the bathroom first, right? I've got to get to the faucet, turn on the water, right? Get my toothbrush, my toothpaste, right? There's literally probably actually about 30 or 40 steps that you're actually taking that your body does automatically, right? But when your brain is getting damaged, those steps become harder and harder, right? Because these are things that you have to do in sequence. So, right, just think about those things that your body automatically use, but if it's taking you longer, because it's just a challenge of what comes next, right? When things that I did automatically, maybe I'm going, I don't remember what happens next, right? I don't remember what I'm doing next, right? That could be a little concerning, right? Typical age-related, again, we make mistakes. I'm not good at math. I've never been good at math. I have a problem carrying numbers, transposing numbers, right? That's not my strong point. So I'm gonna make errors, right? We are humans, that happens. But again, right, it's not where I have to make sure it's not happening right too often. I'm not paying bills, things like that, right? That's a concern, but we all make those mistakes. And I want you to hear from John, because again, this is an actual real individual through the association, and he'll talk about his sign.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because of I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was what I was trying to remember, which was I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was really a vicious circle. So I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things, and that there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
Right. So, and again, I love hearing from individuals because you see, right, this is not somebody you would typically think of with dementia or Alzheimer's. He's very articulate. He's in the very beginning stages, right? So he's able to share what he noticed. But that is an individual living with this disease, right? But he noticed what was not normal for him, right? The next one that we're going to look for is difficulty completing familiar tasks. Again, right, that people with dementia commonly have problems driving to a familiar location, right? Again, unfortunately, we see a lot of those silver alerts, right? That is probably somebody who was heading to a place they probably knew and got lost. They forgot where to go, right? Organizing a grocery list, again, those things that you've done time and time again, but now those tasks are becoming harder. You're forgetting those things. Remembering a favorite game. Sometimes you played bridge with someone and now you seem like they're getting angry because you're changing the rules, or the rules have changed. Well, the rules haven't changed. They've just forgotten what the rules are, right? But they've been playing this for years and years. I tell people, we had a neighbor that she walked to the church in our neighborhood, and I would watch her. She had dementia, but we would keep an eye on her because she knew that route time and time again. But there were some neighbors that found her somewhere else because she forgot where she was going, right? She had done that route years and years and years, but it was no longer familiar to her, right? And again, what is a typical age-related? Absolutely, with new technology, right, it can become, remember, new information. So if you're having trouble with a new appliance, a new phone, a new smartphone. You know, my parents got smartphones at the age of 76. Had never had smartphones before. We had to get them because they had a house, a new house, and had a Ring. And I'm like, well, you have to have a smartphone to have the app to watch the video. My dad is frustrated to no end, and I keep, assuring him, it's understandable. You have not used this technology, and you're 70. Well, now he's 78. But right? So that's new. That is understandable that he's not going to know some of those things to do because it's new to him, right? So kind of that new technology, things that you haven't done before. It's not as easy. It's not as easy as something you've been doing for 40, 50, 60 years, right? And we're going to hear from an expert too talking about this one.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, and not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
Again, right, I use my neighbor. I tell people I've been with the association for about 5.5 years, and I think I'm just more either hypersensitive or just noticed. I probably had about 4 neighbors in the 5.5 years that have had this disease. And so we had another neighbor that, again, to the extreme of, she had been in her house for a week with no electricity, because she forgot to pay her electricity bill. And just, it didn't faze her that she was living in darkness, probably spoiled food and things, but right, that's to an extreme of where she just did not realize that something was wrong, right? That's just, right, that was to the extreme, but that was the dementia. So the next sign, again, another kind of common thing we think about when we think about this disease, confusion with time or place, right? So someone living with Alzheimer's or other dementia can lose track of dates, seasons. So right, having trouble understanding is something that's happening immediately. For example, we do a support group for individuals caring for their loved ones with dementia. We actually have a group for people living with dementia, but one of the caregivers was mentioning that, he said, I can't tell my wife she has an appointment next week. We have a doctor's appointment next week because she will ask. Once he tells her, she must have asked 10 times that day, right? Because next week was not a concept anymore for her. Tomorrow wasn't a concept for her anymore, right? So she was repeatedly asking because she didn't understand if it wasn't happening now, right? A week from now, tomorrow, it didn't make sense with her. It didn't, right? So again, forgetting where they are, how they got there, unfortunately, right, where we have individuals that are lost out there driving, or again, just walking around, they don't know those routes anymore, where they are. Again, typical age-related, talked about, sometimes you are confused with the week, right? Something gets changed, but, right, always kind of this end, but you still have the ability to figure it out, right? You take a step back and you go, okay, yeah, let me look at my calendar, what day it is, or somebody to ask what day it is. That's one of those kind of normal things, right, as we age. I think for anybody, right? We say age-related, but I think it happens for most people, most of these normal things, right? The next one we're gonna look at is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. This is one that I think is very interesting, that I even learned about. I mentioned this coming to the association. I've always worked with older adults and family caregivers, but didn't think of this as kind of those signs. So for someone having vision problems, it could be a sign of dementia, which is interesting. So this is kind of the factor. So, someone says, gosh, I don't know, my eyes are gotten so bad, I can't see anymore, I can't see the pages, when I'm reading. So they go to the eye doctor, they get the test, they're looking at the organ, the mechanism of the eye, and it's fine. So, right, the eye itself is fine. Where's the problem? It's in the brain, right? So the brain, dementia is damaging the brain enough to where the connection there's a problem with the connection now. Or hearing. So it's not the ear that's a problem. The organ, the mechanism of the ear is all fine, but it's the brain that's having problems connecting and telling your ear to hear things, to see, right? Which is, again, you don't always think about that when people are having trouble with balance. Again, they're doing a lot of studies too, again, with hearing loss in older individuals, as far as risk factors, where, right, and think about it, I mean, again, I'm not a scientist, but it's kind of one of those things of, if you're not hearing people, right, your brain is processing everything, right? Your brain is processing what you're seeing, what you're hearing. So when people are talking to you, your brain is working, right? You're challenging your brain, you're listening to them, you're engaging. So when you stop hearing that, what's happening? Your brain isn't going to be as active, right? I tell people this is a good example. This is how I got my dad to get hearing aids. He was having hearing loss. He was stubborn, listening to the TV loud, not hearing us. And I told him, again, he was very, stubborn, the vanity part, didn't want to wear a hearing aid. And I had been reading, because we get information on Alzheimer's and eventually get a lot of the updated information. I said, Dad, they're doing research on the fact that, hearing loss as we get older could be a risk factor for this. And he was like, what? So where did he go? He went to the doctor and got himself some hearing aids. But right, it's just thinking about things that you don't realize, but just understanding, right, how much our brain just controls our body, and those things can be happening that we don't necessarily think about. So again, trouble reading, judging distances, color contrast, right? Sometimes when driving, right, that your peripheral vision, right, all those things that you need that could be getting affected if you have this disease, right? So what's a typical age-related, right? Cataracts can happen, glaucoma, right? Things we can't control if we have genetic kind of vision issues, things like that. So we're going to hear from an expert on that.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing, and in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
So again, Ruth is saying she works in our helpline, right? So again, it's not the organ is fine. It's the brain, right, that's having the problem. Yeah, very interesting. That's kind of what I'm definitely learning on. So the next one is going to be new problems with words or speaking or writing, right? And speaking or writing. So again, someone with Alzheimer's related dementia may stop in the middle of a conversation, right? Again, you're talking to them, you're having a conversation, and all of a sudden they get lost, right? They're kind of gazing away, or they're just, right, because they truly don't remember what they were going to say next, right? Or again, that repetition, repeating themselves, struggling with vocabulary. Sometimes people have seen where maybe an individual, they're losing that word, they want to say watch, but that word is not coming to them. So they may say, that clock on your hand, because they're trying to pull familiar words that they still know, but they're losing other things. Another example that we've been given sometimes is people, if English is not their native language, maybe Spanish. We had a lady, there's a video where her mom, she was Greek, and so she realized that as the disease were progressing, her mom was reverting back to her native language. Remember, that's the language that she's spoken for much longer than English that she had to learn, so she was reverting back to that. She was speaking more in her native language. It's kind of interesting. The brain is just an amazing organ. And then again, having those familiar objects, calling them the wrong names, or having trouble recalling what that thing is called, right? Some of those kind of main indicators. Again, typical age-related, trouble finding the right word. I struggle, so right, I'm like, I know what it is, right? But I have the ability where I can Google now and I can look it up, I still have those abilities to try to recall and figure that out, right? That's just, things happen sometimes you just forget those in the moment. And this is Phil talking. He's very interesting too, in his signs that were happening.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
And you notice, right, that big pause that he took. And this is an individual, right, words, journalism from his career, in that struggle, right? If that's what he was noticing, because it was different for him, right? We had a gentleman that was in our group, same thing, he was a reporter, avid runner, worked out, but he has this disease, and so it was just a lot of repetition about stories he would tell us over and over again, right? But this is a man who dealt with vocabulary and words and language, and just was this disease was destroying all of that, right, unfortunately. So the next one we're going to look at is, again, kind of one common that we may hear about with misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps, right? So an individual with Alzheimer's may lose things, but again, the key here is unable to go back over the steps to find them, right? I think that's the key part, right? So that may be an individual, right, where you hear them, say they're accusing people of stealing things from them, right? You took my money, or you took my keys. I didn't put them there. I would have never moved them there, right? But they did. They just didn't remember, right? or again, right, seeing that may occur more frequently where they're accusing people. Now, right, again, I could walk into a room and go, why did I walk in this room, right? Probably because, again, I'm doing 20 things at once, but I have the ability, right, to take a step back, take a breath, and go, okay, you know, I had my purse, I put my bag down, oh, there it is, right? So that's right, that's this, again, losing things and be unable to, right? That's the key, is those steps that, you know, that they just can't even recall anymore. You know, they didn't even remember where they were when they placed this, right? That's a difference between you may, you know, losing something and going, okay, here's where I was, let me take a step back, you know, I was at a restaurant, maybe I think I left my wallet, right, I'm gonna call, right? Those are still steps you can take that is very different than someone just losing that step altogether, right? Again, typical age related, we may lose that from time to time, but we're still retracing those steps to try to find whatever we may have misplaced or lost, right? Again, the expert's gonna talk a little bit about this.
So some people wonder if, you know, if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it, we can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in, they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door, I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
Right, so good. I used to hear a common thing too where somebody would say, well, if you find your keys in the freezer, that's a problem, right? Well, if I had groceries and I was putting my ice cream and my stuff away and I had my, you know, it could be right. Now, if I had a full sandwich that I made and it was hidden underneath clothes in a drawer, that's different, right? Right, so think about that, right? I think it scared people because they were like, oh my God, if my keys are in the refrigerator. I'm like, well, if you had stuff you were putting in there, it's understandable, right? I mean, sometimes, again, I've had bags of stuff, I throw them in, and I'm like, where did they go? Well, that's understandable, right? I didn't want to scare people because I had heard that a lot. Well, if you find your keys in the freezer, okay, well, again, if I was there for a reason, yes. Now, again, if I wasn't there for any reason, or again, this sandwich that I made, and right, I'm hiding it, or I'm putting it in a drawer with clothes, that's not a norm where I would put my sandwich, right? That's right. Those slight, right? You think about it, it makes sense in those. I mean, we don't want to scare people to think, you know, I misplace things. That happens, right? Decrease. So this one, next one, decreased your poor judgment. Again, kind of one of those common things we may see, where again, someone with Alzheimer's may use poor judgment when dealing with money, paying less attention to grooming themselves, right? So this is unfortunately where we see a lot of individuals being taken advantage of, right? Whether it's by outside or unfortunately family members, right? Where, you know, grandma, you know, can I have some money? Realizes grandma didn't remember that they gave the money, go back again, ask grandma for more money, right? It's sad, but you hear those stories of, or again, you know, when they talked about mail piling up, maybe there's sweepstakes, right? Someone who's, you know, getting duped into paying for all of these things that they're not remembering they're paying for, right? Or subscribing to, right? That's kind of that poor judgment in the money, right? Or again, grooming. And I use my neighbor as an example. The one that she would walk to her church. What would be a big indicator for us is I would see her in the same clothes, right? Day after day after day. Right? And in very warm weather. You know, we know Texas heat, it was 100 degrees and she used to wear this very heavy polyester suit. It's like, right, it's not, you wouldn't normally want to wear, you know, heavy clothing in 100 and something degree weather. But that concept wasn't right. It didn't, her grooming, she didn't pay attention to that anymore. So it was, you know, clothes day in, day out, same clothes we were seeing. And again, maybe not as appropriate for weather related, just not realizing, you know, again, some people are cold nature, you want to wear, but just right, those kinds of things, looking at grooming, how they're keeping themselves, those kinds of things, right? Age related, absolutely, we make, you know, bad decisions sometimes. I love to keep my car on E until I have to get gas at the very last minute. Is that the best decision ever? No, but right, I make mistakes, right? So we are allowed to make those. And this is Teresa, and I love to hear from Teresa because she is, again, very articulate about what her sign was with this.
The way I kept my house, I wouldn't say I was OCD, but pretty close to it. And all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet rat, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
So again, so some key things, right? It was her standard of living, changes she noticed in herself, right? She was not known for keeping all those things. Very meticulous, very clean, but now these things were starting to pile up and happening, right? Not the norm for her. Number 9 is going to be withdraw from work or social activities. Again, right, you may see an individual things that they enjoy doing, right? If they liked playing games, but when you realize you don't remember the rules anymore, or you don't remember how to play, of course they're not going to be engaging in those anymore, right? It's going to be a challenge. Keeping up with their favorite, again, sport, activity. I always tell individuals, right, you live in a community, you see your friends and neighbors, you know, people that go to activity centers. You know, I tell my parents, they go to a center, I'm like, please keep an eye on your friends, right? If you notice someone who was very talkative, they always engaged, and now they're just a little more quiet, you know, something might be going on. I mean, there could be medical issues, obviously, if you don't see somebody for a while, but just kind of keep in mind that, you know, again, if you're around a group of 5 or 6 people and you all are talking and talking, and your brain is having a hard time processing, whether you're not hearing as well, whether, again, there's something going on that's challenging you from not following the conversation, they're going to start to disengage, right? They either, a lot of reasons, right? They're fearful of what's happening, they don't understand, they're trying to hide it, right? So, right, those things that, again, that you may see somebody enjoy, their world just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller because they're recognizing, right, those things that are new to them, or that's just harder for them, right? Some typical age-related, right, again, as we get older, you know, some things aren't interested anymore. We don't want to do that anymore. We don't have to do that anymore, right? That's our choice to do that, but you're making those choices, not because you're just not realizing that something's going on, right? So
One of the most common changes and early on is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit, and then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities, because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
Right, so like Dr. Sally, that comfort zone, right, that what they recognize. We always say too, where we tell families, you know, even people that are already living with the disease, right, we call it like, you don't want to quiz people. I think that's what people start to do too. Do I remember this? Let me ask, do you remember this? Do you remember somebody's name? How scary and frustrating that can be, right? Think about, you know, you don't know your granddaughter's name, you know, and somebody continues to ask you, come on, Dad, you know her name, How devastating and hurtful that can be, right? When you're realizing, I don't remember her name, right? So we have a whole thing about using, you know, reminiscing and things like that, as opposed to like quizzing somebody and interrogating somebody, you know, if their memory or thinking is still intact. There are a lot of other ways to kind of challenge and do that without hopefully making somebody feel, you know, bad, that there are some problems, right? There's some things going on. So the last sign is going to be changes in mood and personality. Again, another one I talked about that kind of comes more with depending on where the dementia is happening. So again, some people may be more confused, suspicious, right, depressed, fearful, or anxious. So it's those mood changes that are happening even before sometimes the memory issues. Getting upset easily, right, with friends when they're out of their comfort zone, right, because they're not remembering, or again, someone's taking stuff from them because that's not where they put it, right, again, that could happen with the frontal lobe. People are having it in the frontal lobe, that tends to be more behavior issues sometimes, and mood, and so again, we'll hear from them talking about those.
Another early sign of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated, or more impatient, or a little moody. or have a shorter fuse, or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
And again, we talk about age-related too, and things, as we get older, or even just in general, sometimes again, big crowds, I don't even like to be in big crowds anymore. That just irritates me. As I think I've gotten older, it bothers me more to be in big crowds, right? So again, that's me as I'm happening, as I'm aging. It's not anything, but right there, typical things can happen. Change, right? Nobody likes change. So right, kind of some things can, when your routine is thrown off, people get irritated or upset, right? That has nothing to do with the dementia or Alzheimer's. So again, so that is basically the signs. I like to spend, I know what time I may skip these but I like to spend a lot more time on these because again, these are the core things that we look at. Are there any questions kind of based on those? Anything that kind of got somebody going like, okay, aha, let me ask that, or is there concern, anything like that? Again, I'm just going to do the recap on this, right? Again, so these signs are just a guide. I don't want to go back and start diagnosing each other, okay, right? We're not going to self-diagnose, but these are just things to keep in mind, right? A guide. And again, remember that, people can experience one or multiple warning signs. They don't have to experience them all for there to be concern, right? There could be one that is causing a concern enough to want to go see a doctor, right? Talk to somebody, share that, let your doctor know what's going on, with that, right? It's a change in you. There's something different going on, right? I'm gonna go to, so we also do, we like the number 10. This one is, I do want to go over with you all a little bit more because, right, we talked about, right, so what happens if you do notice someone, right? Your loved one, friend, family member, what are the things that the steps you can take to kind of help them, right? Again, this is not, we don't talk about this readily. We want people to feel comfortable in approaching someone comfortably, right, and safely to try to help them. Because again, we also talk about it, that early detection, so right, the earlier we can hopefully catch these signs and symptoms, although we don't have a cure, there's lifestyle factors we can help manage, there's some new medications coming out, so right, there's some things that we do need to talk about in terms of planning, right, what our wishes are, what do we want, right, that we need to get in the early stages, because unfortunately, that person will get to a point, right, where they're not going to be able to tell you their wishes, or right, cognitively, they're not legally, right, they're not able to do that, so right, we don't want to wait till that end. So again, we have a 10-step approach. We like the number 10, right? So again, what if you are noticing? So number 1, right, we're assessing this. So we tell individuals, just right, it's kind of a matter of, right, we want to be clear and direct, right? Again, walking into somebody and saying, I think you have dementia. We even say, we want to probably put those words out, right? That language, dementia, Alzheimer's, that scares people, right? So maybe it's not about, we leave that words out, right, and we talk about the facts, right? So maybe you're jotting down, what changes in memory or thinking or behavior are you seeing? I'm noticing, I sat with mom yesterday for 10 minutes and she told me the same story 5 times, right? That's an observable, that's an issue, right? So right, what are those things that you are clearly seeing, jotting those down, of what are those changes that you're seeing in that person, right? What else is going on? We like to find, again, hopefully if you know that person, or maybe they're friends or family that you can share that with or talk to. A lot of times, what else is going on medically, right? Sometimes they've had a change in medication. Is there a new medication that they've been given? My mom is diabetic. A few years ago, the doctor changed her medication. Saw her, she scared me to no end. She was repeating herself. She was very confused. Anyway, it was the medication. Right? She had an adverse reaction to the medication. So when she was off the medication, she was fine, but that concerned us, right? But it was a medical issue. Maybe again, there's something going on. Depression, individuals, it mirrors a lot of dementia, right? So there could be a lot of other factors. For women, urinary tract infections, very severe infections as women. For some reason, we don't always feel the effects of a UTI. So if it gets severe enough, people can have severe hallucinations, delusions with UTIs, right? So there could be, so right, what else may be going on? Maybe asking, again, is there a change in medication? Are there other diagnoses that they have that could be affecting, right? So really kind of, what does that look like as well? Again, what you're doing today, and you can always reach out. We have the Alzheimer's Association information, right? Learning learning about the signs, learning about, detection, what you can do to get a diagnosis, right? That's a very key step too, right? Again, has anyone else noticed the changes? Again, maybe, you as a friend, coming from you, have their children noticing? I always tell people too, right, just, I'm a licensed master social worker, I'm a professional, but I am the baby of the family, right? Well, there's two, it's only two of us, but I'm the baby. Things I tell my dad, don't always go, because he still sees me as a 10-year-old little girl, right? But I tell him things, and then he'll go to the doctor and he'll go, Diane, doctor told me this. I told him the same thing 2 months ago, right? But coming from me, right, it may be a peer, it may need to be, right, a person, maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's a spiritual leader they trust, right? So really thinking about, is somebody else noticing those changes, or can get involved? Because that's key, right? That's all key, and also noticing that, it's not just you, other people, right, are noticing those things. And again, right, how do we have that conversation? So really, right, again, who should have the conversation to discuss the concerns? Again, I use that example again, coming from a child may not hit as well as somebody, a friend, or again, a religious leader or a professional, right? You may have to have that person involved. The association, we do what we call family consults. Sometimes families come in, maybe they've already gotten the diagnosis, or mom is showing these signs and I don't know how to approach her, I don't know how to talk about it. So they come into our office or they call our helpline and they get those guidance and tips on how do I have this conversation, right? And who should have it? Who should I get involved, right? What is the best time and place? Again, right, we want that person to feel safe, to be approachable, right, in terms of talking about that. Again, you're not just going to walk up to that person. Can we have a meeting, comfortable, safe? And so, right, where is the best place? I tell people, again, we have an office on Blanco and 410. Some families will contact us, and we have a beautiful care consult room. These families donated couches, and it's just a very comforting room. So some families come in there if they need to, right? So thinking about what are those places that would be the best time and place to have that. And again, what will you, the person having the conversation, say, right? Sometimes you have to have that back and forth conversation, and you play devil's advocate, I'm gonna tell dad, I'm noticing these problems, and dad's gonna say, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm an adult, stop trying to tell me what to do, right? So then how am I gonna react to that, right? We talk about how do we use I statements, it's about you, it's I'm concerned, I love you, I wanna make sure you're taken care of, these are the things I need to help take care of you, right? So we coach, and we have, again, our helpline is amazing, they answer that line 24 hours a day, but you kind of have to have that conversation back and forth. Okay, if I say this, I know dad, or I know my friend, they're not gonna have it, right? They're not gonna listen to that. And I'm thinking, so what are those comforting things that we can do? Obviously, not always the case, but if you also, again, especially with spouses, if you go to the same doctor, let's go together, right? I'll go with you, so that right there, that as much as we can feel them, safe and comforted and supported as possible. And really, right, I always tell individuals and families, please do not get deterred. Most of the time it's going to take several conversations. It's very rare that, you can walk up to somebody, have a conversation like this, and they go, okay, yeah, I'm on with it. I think there's something wrong with me. I'm going to the doctor today. Right, that's not always going to happen. It's pretty rare. So don't get discouraged. It may take several conversations. Unfortunately, we don't want to get to the point where somebody has an actual acute, like an accident or a fall, right, where they're forced to deal with it. But sometimes you've done everything that you can to, share with that person your concerns, they're not listening, and something happens to them medically, right? And they have no choice but to do that. Sometimes for families, that's kind of it's kind of leverage too for some individuals. It's like, look, let's make the decisions now, because if you fall and you break a hip, right, we can't control that anymore, right? Once you're in the hospital, we have to deal with things then and there. But how, if we planned it and had these things in place, that's better for you, because your wishes are being listened to, right? So there's kind of things that we can talk about and how do we have, but definitely don't get discouraged that it could take several conversations for it to kind of hit, right, and get to the doctor. And then obviously reach out, support. You have information there. I have magnets up here. The Alzheimer's Association, that's what we are here for. Again, we are a nonprofit. Our goal is to get individuals, whether they are concerned, educated, living with the disease, what support can we find for them in the community. Our helpline is 24 hours a day. We have trained clinicians around the country. If you call now, they will answer. If you call at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody will answer. So it's an amazing resource to use. and reach out for help. And obviously, right, seeing a doctor, you know, we tell individuals, right, this is a diagnosable disease. You know, years ago it was the belief, if you've heard, you know, where you couldn't tell for sure until somebody died and they autopsied their brain, right? That is not the case. So, you know, for the most part, you know, we tell individuals, seeing a specialist, you know, that would be great. We'd love everybody, you know, to, you know, see a neurologist, right? People that know, whether as you're aging, a geriatrician, neurologist, neuropsychologist, right? Those are the experts in dealing with the brain, but you may not always have access, right? So primary physicians can diagnose. Unfortunately, sometimes we find that they don't always want to do that, but there are tests that can be done. Sometimes if you've heard, they might start off where, you know, you go to your doctor, you say, doctor, you know, I think there's some, you know, I'm just having some memory problems, I don't know what's going on. They may start with what they call a mini mental status exam. Has anybody ever had that before? Okay, so mini mental, my mom's physician, her primary, is amazing. He does it for her he did it as a baseline. He does it every 6 months she goes. So basically they run a couple of tests. It's more like, they call it the clock test. One part of it may be a clock where they tell the individual, okay, I want you to draw the face of a clock and put the hands at 2:15. Right? So the idea, obviously, you know, you draw the face, but somebody that may have a distorted, you know, their brain is being damaged, they may hear face, and we've seen pictures of somebody actually drawing a face. They've lost it. After that, they don't understand that it's supposed to be a clock, right? So that, you know, there's something going on. Or the doctor may be assessing you, talking to you about your health, and they'll go, okay, chair, light, wall. And then they'll keep talking to you. 10 minutes later, they're going to tell me those 3 words that I gave you. Okay, and then some may be like counting backwards and forwards, right? So they call it a mini mental. There's several versions, but that's just usually should be like a baseline, right? So you get scored on, okay, are there real concerns, or maybe, you know, as we're aging, this is kind of a normal. But next 6 months when you go to the doctor, my mom, then the doctor does it again to see if there's been any significant changes, right? That's the ideal. Unfortunately, you know, and I tell people, ask your doctor, talk to your doctor about that. Can I get a baseline just to make sure, you know, everything's going cognitively? But again, and then if they feel like there needs to be more, absolutely MRIs, CAT scans, those are tests that can be done. And they do ask, sorry, this thing is not, oh, I have to close it out. So there's another question that we get sometimes too is, right, genetics, family history. Doctors will maybe ask those questions. So obviously you've had like kind of first, so like your parents, you know, we've had families, well, my mom had it, all my aunts have it, am I gonna get it? We don't consider it necessarily hereditary. It does increase your risk factors, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get this disease. We've had individuals that it runs very much in their family, but they've never gotten it. And we've had individuals that have never had it in their family and get this disease. I think, again, that's the unfortunate challenge of, you know, why they keep, you know, right, we're trying to find that cure, we're trying to find, you know, the exact cause in individuals, right? So really just the challenge of that. But again, it is diagnosable, and with the MRIs, you know, they can tell you, right, is it the Alzheimer's where it's happening? Is it the frontal lobe? They can literally see where that damage is happening, right? So again, right, early detection, and we definitely, the idea is that you're paying attention to any memory, thinking, or behavior changes that you're noticing in yourself or other people. That again, those changes are unusual for that person, right? Not the norm for that person. You know, taking that 10-step approach. If you need to have a conversation, reaching out to the association if you just need to know how to go about that again. And I'm gonna go, like I said, I'm gonna go through. This is again, just talking a little bit about the diagnosis, because again, and they'll quiz, but we do tell individuals, right, for the major thing too, right? So this gives you a little example, right? Some of the things they may do. So Mary, you know, she went to the doctor, they may ask about medical history, they may do a physical exam, you know, there are lab tests that they want to do, that mental cognitive status test, right? Maybe they need to get to the point where they're going to do brain imaging, right? But there are tests, right? Screening for depression, I told you that sometimes people that are depressed, it can mirror. You know, people that are severely depressed can have memory problems, right? So really assessing, are there other diagnoses, are there other things that are happening medically that can be causing or mirroring this, and it's not really dementia, it's something else that is treatable, right? So, but there are things that they can look at and tests that can be done. And I'm just gonna go probably to the last part because we've covered all of that. I just want you to make sure too that you do know again about the association. So again, obviously, even before, if you don't have the diagnosis, either way, you get a diagnosis, even before that, we want you to reach out to the association. So we have several ways to do that. I'll pull this last slide up here. Come on, there we go. Okay, so we have several ways that you can reach us. On the phone, I had mentioned our 24-hour helpline. I have magnets here you can take. Please put them on your refrigerator, put it in your phone, because they answer that line 24 hours a day. If you like to search on the computer, you're one that likes to go look up things, we do have the alz.org. Our website has amazing resources for caregivers, for individuals, again, that are living with the disease, if you just want to know more about it. This presentation, there's a lot of videos that you can just watch. This presentation is on a video. We have a lot of other topics. We would prefer to be in front of you and talk to you and have you ask questions, but you can go online and watch any of those that are all free. And then we also have what's called Community Resource Finder. So it's also on the website, but the neat thing about that page, alz.org/CRF, is that it's a joint page with AARP. So that's how you find people, they vet themselves basically. So if you're looking for resources, okay, where do I find a neurologist? Bless you. They have to actually submit themselves to get on. We don't control that as far as the resources, but there are a lot of things that you can look out for: in-home care, neurologists, all kinds of resources. Also, like where we may have support groups, where we may have other presentations in the community. Now with the virtual world after the pandemic, it's nice in the sense that other chapters and other places have virtual presentations. So if you can't get out and about, or we're not offering anything, you can always, and that's live. I mean, that is a live person, a volunteer that does those, where you can ask questions and things like that. But that's where you would find all of those in your area, if there are some. And they're not always, but they're usually something. And then that's also with AARP. There's a link, there's where you can click on AARP that has amazing, their resources for caregiving, all kinds of things for them, but they have on that same page, you can access both. So it's a really nice resource. And then again, we just tell people, right, some people want to know, how do I get involved? If I don't necessarily have somebody with dementia or dealing with it. We are a volunteer-driven organization. If you love to do this and go out and present and talk to people, we train individuals to become community educators. So they can go out. We are invited to health fairs, so we have table events. Sometimes we're just asked to take our material. We have volunteers that go out to those places and just hand out, educate people on the disease. Advocacy, we do have for our elected officials, that we have volunteers that will talk with the elected officials, because of course obviously we definitely promote a lot of funding for research to find a cure. Sometimes there's bills that go through that we want to support because it's funding for caregiving, things like that. So those advocates on a volunteer level help us do that. The other one I think is so important for everyone is we also have what's called trial match. Our thing too is that, obviously we want, the cure is going to be found by doing research and studies, and so individuals to get involved, healthy individuals, you don't have to be a person living with dementia. Sometimes they prefer that you're not, because the studies that they're looking at are healthy individuals. But we have what's called trial match. You can look it up. You're not signing up for a particular study or clinical trial. You're just basically putting information, and then if they find a study or clinical trial that they think you may be good for, they'll contact you. You can obviously refuse if you don't want to do that, but sometimes they're just studies with questionnaires. How's your lifestyle? What do you do to keep active? Sometimes they're just questionnaires. You're not necessarily getting a pill or an injection, anything like that, but if you want to help in that way, that's the way we're going to find a cure. So that's an option. And then our walk down Dollar, we're actually just finishing our season. Our San Antonio walk was October 19th. I'll be in Corpus we have 2 more left, one in Corpus and one in our Rio Grande Valley this weekend. But that is our biggest fundraising every year. We have 7 in our chapter area. San Antonio, of course, is our biggest one here. We also have one, closest one here would be New Braunfels. But that is, you can come and join us, you can raise dollars. It's an amazing community event. Or even if you want to do something here in your community. We also have another called The Longest Day. I may talk to Lucy about it if she's here, or she's in the back. This is a great way to get involved and do fun activities here in your community. People sometimes have bake sales, or they have bingo thing, and they give the proceeds to the association. So they call it The Longest Day. That's another fundraiser, but there's things that you don't even have to go out, you can do in your own community to support the association. So that's just a way people ask, how do I I get involved? And then how do we support? I think I brought a one page too. Again, I think our main thing is our helpline, right? Please contact the helpline, but we do connect individuals to, again, what are resources in the community, support groups for caregivers. We have online and in person. So again, any way that we can hopefully help support or find you resources if you are dealing with this disease, that is what we're for and here for, and making sure that people are educated right in the communities about this disease. So that is again how you reach us. Thank you all so much. Are there any questions that you have? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I thought I heard something on TV several months ago about a new medicine, but that there were side effects. It could cause stroke or brain bleed or something.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So again, I tell people, disclaimer again, social worker, not a doctor. Absolutely. So there are 2 medications that came down the pipe. We actually had 3, but the first one that came out about 2 years ago, Biogen, who manufactured it, decided they went in a different direction, so they stopped producing it. So there is the newest one that you're probably talking about is called donanemab. And so absolutely. So that's when we talked about early detection. It is only they're seeing progress in people with early stages of Alzheimer's in the very beginning. But absolutely, right, research has shown there could be some things. What I tell people is, please talk to your doctor about it if you have concerns and get that information. You can call the helpline. They can send you more on what exactly the drug is, maybe what those things that came out about the side effects. Because I think too is, what I'm learning is that it was a very small percentage of the individuals that were in the clinical trials, and right, each individual is so different in their body, right? We tell people, even if you have 2 people that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they can look completely different, right, in their journey. So because of our body makeup, because of other health issues, whatever that may be, right, it just depends on how, I guess, successful that medication is. But we are hopeful in that it has shown some really good indicators, and the FDA, of course, our thing too is anytime you see a drug out there, we tell, be a savvy consumer, right? That you make sure that it has like FDA approval, right? That there is a significant clinical group. I will say, a lot of these brain health drugs you see online, right, or on commercials for that you buy over the counter. Again, we just say, be a savvy consumer, talk to your doctor, call the association. Oh, I've heard this drug, I saw a commercial for it. Does it really help me? They get sheets and things from our researchers on what could be good and what may not be, what may not be the greatest for you, or things that you have to consider, right? Again, because what works for your neighbor may not work for you because you are not, right? You are not made up like your neighbor. So, but yes, we are optimistic about those drugs that are coming out, and even more in detection. Now they're looking at what they're calling biomarkers. So the goal, the hope is that, just like when you go to the doctor and they do your blood work and they're checking like your A1C, right? You can see those level numbers if you have diabetes, that we will get to the point where, years before you're actually showing signs and symptoms, they may be able to do like a blood biomarker that tells you, oh, you may have these plaques and tangles, those kinds of things. It's not there yet. You can't go to your doctor today and say, I want that test or that blood work, but there are amazing researchers out there that are really optimistic and looking at all of this. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all so much for your time.